You are now listening to the sound of sanity. This sound will continue for the duration of the program. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sound of Sanity. We're going to hit the ground running today. I am Nathan. I'm your humble and obedient host. We've got Ben. He's the preacher who's a teacher of sanity.
Hola.
And Ben, you have the privilege, the exciting responsibility, the authority. You have so many things when it comes to introducing. I mean, I don't even want to say anything more. I want to let you do it.
I have a working voice box. You can hear it right now. It's Jacob Insel, pastor who's a master of sanity.
Hello, Jake.
Hey.
Welcome to Sound of Sanity.
Thanks.
You feeling sane today?
Am I feeling sane today?
Or did I say you feeling insane today? It was hard to tell. You know what? Who cares? You're going to feel sane by the end of this episode.
That's right.
Because we are going to talk about what we're going to talk about, which is about an ancient mass child sacrifice in Peru was what we wanted to talk about today. This is an article from the National Geographic. I can link to it in the show notes, but what's the gist here?
There was a single event mass ritual murder of 140 kids. They found the grave and were able to kind of piece it all together because of all the kids were all killed the same way at the same time and put in the same place. So, anyhow, it was the thing. They killed a bunch of babies, a bunch of kids, a bunch of little ones, and 140 of them they found.
Okay, so...
and it dated roughly 500 years ago, according to whatever... archaeological principles they have.
So there was some barbarism from a long time ago. Why do we want to talk about this today?
Well, this is just the usual sort of, hey, demonic child sacrifice is a thing that's always happened and is nothing new. And I dropped it in the Discord for that sort of reason. But then when we were talking about things to talk about, Ben brought up a book that he has read or has been reading.
In the middle of reading.
And because... we live in this sort of like crazy tension between what we're not allowed, white man bad, and so conquistadors bad, native peoples good. That sort of, was it Rousseau or whoever, the noble savage?
The noble savage, yeah.
And then you have things like this that, tend to throw mud in the water of that narrative.
Maybe the savage wasn't so noble. In fact, maybe the word savage is an accurate word.
So we brought it up and just were like, is this worth pointing out and worth trying to talk about again? And it was like, I've been reading a book. And so
you've been reading a book, Ben?
I've been reading a book called The Broken Spears. Well, most of it is just selections from the Aztecs' own records of the conquistadors. And some of that, I think, I'm not finished with this book yet, but some of that is like through, Spaniards had native informants whose accounts they wrote down. And some of that is through the Aztecs' own stuff. And just reading about Aztec civilization and the scale on which they practiced human sacrifice was something.
Mm-hmm.
It was something. There was a dude, like a really powerful politician, basically, who codified a new religion, worshiping the sun god. What's his name? I can't remember. And Huitzilopochtli. That's the sun, and he needed to be fed human blood. And this guy basically kept his idea for keeping the Aztecs powerful was to keep them in a constant state of war so that they could get human sacrifices. They even had an ongoing war with like a nearby people who they could have easily conquered because they were super rich, super powerful. They could have conquered, but they didn't. What they wanted was to keep war going so they could always get captives, so they could keep sacrificing captives. You can imagine how much those people hated the Aztecs.
Yep.
When the conquistadors came, they were like, yes, baby, sign us up. Let's wipe. People hated the Aztecs because the Aztecs were just like, we're going to sacrifice. There's even some quote, and I'm not going to be able to pull these like I want, but there's some quote like, it's literally like, all nations are to appear before the sun god. We're to bring in all the nations, which is a demonic parody of Christianity, because of course, what you want with all the nations is to shed their blood.
Right.
Is to kill them. The sun god wants to eat them. And you read about this ancient society and what they were like, it is amazing to me. It's amazing to me. And especially reading things that are kind of in their own words, just how they thought of themselves. But I don't know what you want, but I'm just going to give you a grab bag of interesting stuff.
Please.
Okay, repeat the title for me again.
The Broken Spears.
The Broken Spears.
The Broken Spears. I've rarely found something that's so fascinating. I mean, it's horrible, but I mean, it reminds me of the experience I had in Belize of seeing some, oh man, this is terrible. I want to say Mayan ruins. I think Mayan ruins. And standing in the ruins of a place where people were sacrificed, human sacrifices, and feeling very, very gratified, very happy that this civilization was dead. Just a surge of like anger, just a sense of like this is gross. So before, okay, let me just read a couple of things, because this book recounts a lot of omens the Aztecs saw before the Spaniards got there. So the first bad omen. 10 years before the Spaniards first came here, a bad omen appeared in the sky. It was like a flaming ear of corn, or a fiery signal, or the blaze of daybreak. It seemed to bleed fire, drop by drop, like a wound in the sky. It was wide at the base and narrow at the peak, and it shone in the very heart of the heavens. This is how it appeared. It shone in the eastern sky in the middle of the night. It appeared at midnight and burned till the break of day, but vanished at the rising of the sun. The time during which it appeared to us was a full year, beginning in the year 12 House. It's the name of one of their years. When it first appeared, there was great outcry and confusion. The people clapped their hands against their mouths. They were amazed and frightened, and asked themselves what it could mean. And it just keeps going through all these bizarre, like, disasters and strange omens that happened to herald the arrival of the Spaniards. And some of these are so weird that we don't have a grid for them. I don't have a grid for what I will say the grid hearing.
I'm not subscribing to this, but the grid that a lot of people will put on it is the early UFO.
Sure.
The Aztecs are rich with things that find their way onto those stupid History Channel show, ancient aliens and all that.
Right. Well, my grid is, of course, these people are sacrificing to demons. Demons are actual beings that have real power. And there was a shakeup in the heavenlies, let's say, because all that power and all the sacrifice of blood was about to stop. So here's just a couple more. This is like, there's some creepy horror movie stuff in here, but here I'll tell you the bizarre one, and then I'll tell you the more creepy one. Seventh bad omen: a strange creature was captured in the nets. The men who fished the lakes caught a bird the color of ashes, a bird resembling a crane. They brought it to Moctezuma, so that's Montezuma, but the way you pronounced his name was Moctezuma, in the Black House, which I think is his palace, the Black House. This bird, and this is just, I don't know what can you do with this? This bird wore a strange mirror in the crown of its head. The mirror was pierced in the center like a spindle whorl, and the night sky could be seen in its face. The hour was noon, but the stars and the Mamahuatzli could be seen in the face of that mirror. Moctezuma took it as a great and bad omen when he saw the stars and that other word. But when he looked at the mirror a second time, he saw a distant plain. People were moving across it, spread out in ranks, and coming forward in great haste. They made war against each other and rode on the backs of animals resembling deer. Moctezuma called for his magicians and wise men and asked them, "Can you explain what I have seen? Creatures like human beings running and fighting." But when they looked into the mirror to answer him, all had vanished away, and they saw nothing. Another account describes that the bird vanished. And that's a repeating theme in these accounts. It's like Moctezuma will call the magicians and ask them, like, "Please tell me what's going on." And they'll be like, something is happening and you're going to suffer it. We don't know what. And he'll be like, "Put him in jail." Then he'll send his steward back to question them. And the steward will be like, "They're gone. The jail is empty and no one saw them leave. And I have guards at the doors and we don't know where You're just like, what is happening in this place? So here's maybe the creepiest one. It's the last thing I'm going to read about these omens. The sixth wonder was this: the people heard in the night the voice of a weeping woman who sobbed and sighed and drowned herself in her tears. This woman cried, "Oh, my sons, we are lost." Or she cried, "Oh, my sons, where can I hide you?" And that's one of the antecedents according to this book, of the La Llorona, the Weeping Woman legend of Mexico, and it's one of their goddesses. And you just, I don't know what it's like. You're butting up against the reality of the power, the religious power of human sacrifice, the reality that a spiritual thing corresponded to everything that they did, which we've talked about that kind of thing before, but it's like you're reading a fairy tale about people who sacrificed humans. It's like, did you read the Brothers Grimm to make up that bird? No, they didn't read the Brothers Grimm. They were like interacting with the demonic world in a very intense and gross way. It's more like
when you read
Nebuchadnezzar.
When you read too about their use of psychedelics and how intertwined that was with their religious culture and their interaction with the demonic world, it all gets crazier.
Right.
Like that overlap is real and deep and deeply demonic. And that's why...
Yeah, what we're not saying is they use psychedelics, therefore all this stuff is explainable as natural phenomena.
No, they use psychedelics, and it should... Everybody should be waking up to the reality of the move of our culture into paganism and the rise of psychedelics, and again, the child murder that is abortion. It's just, these things go hand in hand, and you have to be thinking and working your way through it, and you have to get ahead of it. You have to get ahead of, because the idea that is increasingly becoming mainstream is that psychedelics are actually the cure to all of life's problems. They're the cure to our anxiety. They're the cure to our insomnia. They're the cure to our alcoholism. They're the cure to the hatred that's in the world today. What we need is to all just sort of like chill out, take some psilocybin, encounter our dark side in the netherworld, chill out, be cool with killing the babies and everything else. And it all just sort of like goes hand in hand.
Well, the other thing that I thought reading about Motecuzoma's terrified attempts to understand what was going to happen and to be ready to like meet Cortez and meet him as the return of the god, Quetzalcoatl, I believe. Oh, it's him. He's come back. Sending him this special religious armor that he had made and having his messengers dress him in it when they first arrived on the ship. Doing all these things, not knowing really what he was dealing with at all, is that, I mean, the conquistadors are the judgment of God. However much they knew that or not, I don't know. I feel still pretty ignorant of this period and who these people were. I'm learning more about it, but it's just this is the kingdom of Christ.
And they did everything. They were their own judgment. Like,
yes,
they did everything backwards, right? Oh, we're terrified of these Spaniards, and we're terrified that they're the gods and that they're the gods coming to render judgment on us. So let's pave the streets with human blood.
I remember reading that specifically. I remember reading a quote, as I've read a few excerpts from this book, Broken Spear. There's a part where Cortez's men show up and they see the skulls and the heads and the blood and everything, and they all start throwing up. And it's precisely because the savages have said, well, we need to prepare for them and we need to appease them, so let's do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And they're just horrified.
We couldn't have done anything more horrifying and to make them more ready to just raze this city to the ground.
Well, listen, I mean, here's another quote. Motecuzoma also sent captives to be sacrificed because the strangers might wish to drink their blood. The envoys sacrificed these captives in the presence of the strangers, but when the white men saw this done, they were filled with disgust and loathing. They spat on the ground or wiped away their tears or closed their eyes and shook their heads in abhorrence. They refused to eat the food that was sprinkled with blood because it reeked of it. It sickened them as if the blood had rotted.
They'd mix their chocolate with blood or with different things to make it look like blood, right?
Man.
Different herbs to try to develop even like their chocolate. They would drink it. They'd drink their cocoa, but they tried to get it to emulate blood, both in its consistency and its color.
Trying to develop diet blood, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Man.
It's like
a vampire movie.
Yeah.
Well, so
I was reading about that in a like some part of health social media was like, discover the secrets of and they were like detailing like the ancient recipes for making their chocolate cacao nibs into these concoctions that emulated human blood. It's like,
No, the fact that
wow. And this is the kind of thing that you can read about on like health and fitness Twitter or something like that, because it's like that, it's coming back to that level of detail.
Well, you have to understand that vampirism is real, and it's because people have always understood what goes all the way back to Genesis, which is that the blood is the life. I mean, it's just true. God did make it that way. And so the perversion of that is drinking and eating blood. I mean, it's just that simple. And that's been true of every pagan civilization.
And it's why God forbid it. And it's why God...
He didn't forbid it because no one was ever going to be interested in doing it.
Right. And it's like, what's the one thing that the apostles kept in Acts 15 from the ceremonial law? Don't drink the blood.
Mm-hmm. Well, anything else to say about the book? Or
No, not so far.
What I think is crazy, did you guys ever have to read the narrative of the captivity of Mrs. Mary Rollinson? It's a pretty famous account, first-person account of a woman kidnapped in early America, a Puritan woman kidnapped by...
Yeah, I'm familiar with this story, but I
haven't
think I've
read it.
ever read it.
It's a horrifying story, right? The natives come in, they raise her town, they kill some of her children. I think they kill her husband. It's been a long time since I've had to read it, but she sees her kids die in front of her, and then she's taken captive by these savages and has to live with them. And for a while, and then she eventually is restored to Christendom and writes her tale. And the thing that drives me nuts is you'll read a story about a blue elephant, and then the person who's explaining the story will be like, wasn't that a great story about a pink flamingo? And you'll be like, I thought I was reading a story about a blue elephant. And they're like, yeah, but pink flamingos are what we believe in now. People will be like, man, do you see how Mary Rollinson is just making all these assumptions about the natives? They're like, yeah, she's making those assumptions because they just beat her kid to death with the rock, in front of her. Like, do you see how her Christian beliefs are
Contaminating her ability
to understand the people who murdered her family and inducted her into their savage chanting? And it's like, what do you guys need to understand that these people were brutal? And that's not to say that you could read the primary sources, the first person accounts of how brutal Americans were, Americans, I'm a racist, of how brutal Europeans were, of how brutal Columbus's men were. You can read about the rape. You can read people bragging about the rape of literal sexual rape of Native women. You can read all that stuff. It's not that they were categorically always as bad as they could be, and we were always categorically as good as we could be. That's not true. But there was still a civilization that God had elected for destruction because of its extreme depravity. And there still was a civilization that had some belief in God and in the truth of God and in Christian warfare, and the two aren't equivalent. And you can understand that Columbus's men did terrible things and that malaria blankets are bad. Like we can call out the wickedness of all this stuff. We don't have to be wooden about any of these things.
Yep.
There's lots of bad stuff, lots of bad people. But you have to be able to distinguish between people who are doing great evil in the name of actual good and people who are doing evil in the name of evil. And history is full of both things. And Chesterton says it best. He says, people always say Christ couldn't be really Christ because Christ brought about the Inquisition and brought about all that stuff. And Chesterton's like, no, men are so bad that when the greatest good happens, that's when the greatest bad happens. You should not be surprised. In fact, you should be surprised if it doesn't happen, that the greatest atrocities are oftentimes connected to the greatest good, because that's just how bad we were. So not only should you not be surprised, but you should be like, oh, of course they started the Inquisition in the name of Jesus, because that's just how people are. People are really bad. But I'll tell you who's even worse is the Aztecs. I mean, they were a demonic pagan civilization. And if you didn't catch it, this is their account that bends, that this book collates.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not some white guy that came along and needed to do propaganda for the regime or anything like that.
This is them confusedly writing down all the things and not being able to make sense of it, and not understanding why their gods, despite all of their sacrifices, have elected them for this destruction. Where is the sun god?
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else you guys want to say about this wonderfully edifying topic?
Don't think so.
I do keep thinking about footage I've seen. I mean, it's been all over the place since Dobbs, but all the footage of people just saying, yes, I want to kill my baby. Like, yes, abortion is killing a baby. And I've killed 21 of them. You see, you see that kind of stuff. And it's why I have no patience for Louis C.K. or Bill Burr or any of these guys. They're like, ha, yeah, we know it's killing babies. Let's all have a cathartic laugh about that. Those guys are cowards and idiots, and they're going to burn on Judgment Day. And I have less patience for them, actually, because they figure out. Because, yeah, Bill Burr does feel bad about it. You can tell he feels bad about it. You can tell Louis C.K. feels bad about it. But the fact that they actually have a conscience about it and then figure out a way to make us all kind of uneasily laugh about it is
Chappelle.
Yeah, Chappelle. I think all three of them are damnable. And I hate when I see conservative Christians trying to own them or trying to be happy. Somebody said abortion's murder. Everybody knows abortion's murder. We're getting to the place as our culture becomes more debauched where everybody will say that it's murder. And they'll just say murder's good some of the time or much of the time when it's in service of your gods. So I have no patience for that. That's all I have to say. Anything else you guys have to say?
Nope.
Yeah, I just thought I do have one more thing to say, which is go to patreon.com/Sanity to support the show, be part of our Discord. You can read articles about Peruvian sacrifices early and be like, I wonder if they'll do a show about that. And you can talk with us about G.K. Chesterton's orthodoxy and all kinds of fun stuff. Good group of people on our Discord. And you can do other things on Patreon too. Patreon.com/Sound of Sanity. Until next time.
Stay sane.